What's going on, everybody? Today we have an incredible guest with us, Dr. AnnMaria DeMars. And she has an amazing story, and I know it's going to inspire you. It's going to lift you to a higher level, and it's definitely going to challenge you to be all that you can be. I want to give you a little background on her. After a stint in juvenile hall, AnnMaria ran away from her last foster home at age 15. And then with a fake ID, got a job and an apartment. By age 19, she had her bachelor's degree. Now that amazes me right there because I'm a guy that had to squeeze 4 years of college into 5. So that'll tell you something right there. An MBA at 21. She was the first American to win the World Judo Championship. Then retired from competition to earn her Ph.D., became a professor, quit the university to start her first business, and after the death of her husband, she has founded 4 companies, raised 4 children. That's probably the greatest accomplishment right there to all the parents out there. Been one of Forbes' 40 women to watch over 40. A next-gen leader of the International Game Developers Association Foundation, and AARP Purpose Prize winner. She and her daughter, maybe you've heard of her, Ronda Rousey, are the only mother-daughter combination in the International Sports Hall of Fame. And I was privileged to attend that ceremony, and I want to tell you, it was absolutely amazing, and it was an honor well-deserved. Welcome to the show, Dr. DeMars.
Thank you very much. So were you at the one Ronda was inducted? Where Ronda was inducted?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I had just moved to Chile like 2 weeks before, and I was thinking, well, I'm in Santiago. I'm not going to come. She gives me that, Mom, but I was excited because we would both be in it. So the next thing you know, I'm on a plane from Santiago, changing planes in Toronto and in Columbus. But that's what we do when we have kids, right?
Absolutely. And again, it's such a unique and special group when you get in that Hall of Fame ceremony. Again, that was just awesome that you could be a part of that. So I got to start back at the beginning. What really got you interested in judo? Because, you know, we've seen a lot of shift here where there's a lot of women now that are into the martial arts, but you were kind of a pioneer in this area. So what really got you interested in that? And can you share how your martial arts journey began?
I always say I should make up a good lie for this because it's not the most inspiring story. It was before Title IX, so most sports just didn't allow girls to join. As a coach, if you were a weightlifting coach, you could just say, I don't think girls should be in the gym. And that was it. And so there were only 3 sports in the little town I was living in that let girls join. And one was judo, one was swimming, and one was track. And I was this really short, fat little kid with super thick glasses. And my mom scrounged together the money for a family membership to the YMCA, and she drove up there and she pushed me out of the car and said, join something. And so I joined judo. They had a woman black belt on the mat. The reason they had allowed girls to join was the instructor had a sister and she had wanted to do judo. So by the time I came along, there was a woman black belt instructor. There were other girls on the mat. I mean, there certainly weren't a lot of them, but there were. I thought, man, I got 3 brothers. I could fight. And I was always in trouble as a kid. Like I said, I got arrested for fighting, skipping school, so many juvenile offenses. And, I would get in a fight at school and knock somebody down. And next thing you know, I'm in juvenile hall again. With these judo tournaments and knock some people down, they hung a medal on me and said, we're sending you to France. And I'm like, I like this. This is a better deal. I think I will do this.
That's awesome. When did you kind of find out that you were good at judo? Because, a lot of kids go out for a lot of stuff. But when did you find out that, man, I've really got a knack for this? Like this is really not just in my wheelhouse. I think I can become a champion in this. I think I can rise to the next level. When did you first discover that?
I think I had an overestimate of my ability, which was a big advantage for me. Sometimes not having any money and not having connections can be a good thing because, my mom didn't have money to send me these international tournaments. I was beating all the local kids, right? So I just think I'm the baddest green belt around, right? So I just thought I was good. And then I couldn't afford to go to the nationals unless my way was paid. So once I won the state championships, then they paid my way to the nationals. So I never, in the same thing internationally, when I was number one in the US for the first time. I was still in college and I was sending money home to help mom with the other kids. So there was no way I could have gone and competed internationally. So until I got to the point where I had won my first international tournament that was held in the US, then some other people saw me and said, oh, let's send her to Europe. So I think for me, from very early on, I thought I was better than I was because I didn't go to these higher levels of competition. And I kind of did that with Ronda when she was coming up. When people would say she needs experience, send her to Europe, I'd say she doesn't need the experience of losing. I'll keep her here until she can win.
Interesting. Very interesting. Now, what's crazy is you have just a diverse background. You've got lots of education. And one of the things I noticed right away was that you were able to study overseas. And I want to ask you, how did that benefit and enrich your career, not just in education, but also in the martial arts? How did it stretch you, being out of the comfort zone, out of, what I call, again, comfort zone's kind of a good word, but when you go overseas, everything's different. It's a cultural shift. Everything changes. How did that benefit you and stretch you?
I think it was a great benefit for me, particularly since I went to Japan and I was doing judo. So Japan, 45 years ago, even more so than today, judo is a very male-dominated sport. It's a very male-dominated society. I remember asking one of my professors if he knew of any women engineers, and he kind of acted like I'd asked him if he knew of any women fathers. He says, gets this very confused and says, well, I've never heard of any. Because I said, well, that's what I want to do, is I want to go into engineering. And being in a society where very often I was the only woman on the mat because I had no sense, right? I walked up, I was going to school at Waseda University because that was the school my university had an exchange program with, and walked in and asked if I could train with the judo team, which is kind of crazy. Like some little Japanese student walking in and asking if she trained with the USC football team, but they let me. And that experience was great because so much of my life, I've been working in engineering. Now I run a software company that makes educational games. And very often I'm the only woman in the room, and having that confidence that doesn't mean I don't have a right to be here. It doesn't mean that I don't know just as much or more than anybody else that's here. So I think that's been very good for me because almost all of my life, from industrial engineering to making video games, has been in areas that were almost all men.
Yeah, that's incredible because one of the things I think is amazing, you're the only woman in the room. And in the beginning, just the fact that they're allowing you to do this, but then they had to totally respect you once you're whipping on some of these guys, right?
Most of them did. I mean, there were times and places where people thought they were going to run me out, where they thought women had no place in the sport. And I'm a very small person, but I'm very good at arm bars, and it does not take a lot of pressure to break an arm. And so those people who would slam me around on the mat, I would get them in an arm bar once and say, now let's have a talk. What do you think are the chances this will never happen again? Because the next time it does, I'm doing a back bend on your arm if you keep it up.
Yeah, I think, again, the actions speak louder than words right there for sure. They definitely had to respect you. What was it like to be the first person representing the United States to win the World Judo Championship? I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it really is an incredible, incredible feat.
It is amazing. And here's the really funny thing. I have a granddaughter who's 5, and we were doing the things you do, throwing pennies in the fountain to make a wish. And I said, when I was young, I used to always make the same wish. And she said, what's that? And I said, to be best in the world. And she laughed and she said, that's a silly wish. That couldn't happen. That's impossible. And I said, yeah, but funny thing is, it did happen. So a lot of these things you look back at, and it was funny because I remember they had a sports psychologist working with the team, right? And she's going around the room and she's asking everybody what your goal is. And everybody else is saying stuff like, well, my goal is to have good technique, or my goal is to, not embarrass my coaches. And I'm thinking, this is a tournament we're going to. And so they get to me and I stand up and I say, my goal is to be best on the planet on November 11th. And there were all these other people. I mean, people can be a little bitchy sometimes, right? Well, who do you think you are? Why do you think you're doing? One of my good friends says, "Oh, she doesn't mean that," trying to count things. And I said, "The hell I don't." And then there was some people saying, "Well, what makes you think you can do it? Nobody else has ever done it." So, well, somebody's got to be first. Why not me? I think just having that attitude of, why wouldn't I be able to do it? And that's carried through. Like, we founded this company, 7th-Generation Games, and there were plenty of people that told us, "Oh, you don't know anything about making educational games, and why would anybody buy games about Native Americans or about Latino history? And who there's no money in this, and who cares about it?" And I just said, "Well, I'm gonna do it anyway." And we didn't get any investors, I think, until we had our 3rd game out on the market. And now we have 100,000 users.
Unbelievable. Well, one of the things I want to ask, and I'm kind of getting off my own script here because it just, to me, it really stretches some of the young people listening to this. I think we have a generation right now that a lot of times sets the bar pretty low in life because they feel like they've been beaten down or people have told them they couldn't do it. For you to come out and knowing your background and experience to say, "I'm going to be the best in the world," that means you have a pretty good self-esteem. And so I want to ask, where did you get that from? And somebody in your home life, like what inspired you to be able to have this, I'm not going to take nothing from anybody. I'm going to be the best in the world. Because again, like you already said, most people set their goals so small. They're so, people that they're not stretching goals, I guess is what I would say. So where did you get this self-esteem? What was it that kind of made you think that, hey, I'm going to shoot for being the best?
It's kind of the opposite of what you would think, because I didn't have that, Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best sitcom type of home. Quite the opposite. And I think maybe it was just the determination to prove people wrong. I remember one of my teachers in middle school, we had junior high back then, not middle school. He said to me, "I'm going to see your name in the paper one day. I don't know if it's going to be for robbing the bank or as president of the bank, but I expect that I will see your name in the paper." So I think it was just a determination that I was going to not lower myself to other people's expectations of me. Because I guarantee you that many of the people's expectations when I was young is that I would be in Chino women's prison right now. Ha ha, fool them.
And what's great about this, and why I think it's inspirational, because we do have we've got a full gamut age group of listeners. We have everyone from senior citizens all the way down to a lot of very young people. It's a great lesson for young people is that your environment doesn't determine what your achievement level can be. And, I love your story because, again, you didn't have the greatest environment, but you chose to get out of that and to become who you were going to become. Which leads me to this question. How did you get the nickname Animal?
You knew that, huh? Did you ever watch Sesame Street?
Absolutely.
You know which one Animal is?
Oh, on The Muppet Show, the drummer.
Yes.
Yeah.
The crazy one.
Animal.
Like, yeah, because they said what I thought. It was kind of like that I would just attack and attack and attack and attack and attack and attack. And Animal's just like this little Muppet, but he tears things apart. So that's where that came from.
That's awesome. I never knew that it came from The Muppet Show. That's incredible. So let's talk about fighting a little bit. Your style is definitely more on the offense. So describe to me what factors kind of played into that. In fact, you're known for even saying, the best defense is a good offense. What was it that kind of played into that, or what factors led to you being a more offensive-driven judo individual?
Well, two really crazy things. One is when I started, I was 103 pounds, and they did not have weight divisions for women. So I fought women who, were up to twice my size or more. And one of my favorite techniques, in fact, I was just teaching it to the kids at my judo class in South Central LA today, this week, is Coach Marconi, where basically you throw the person before they get a hand on you. They reach out, you grab their hand, you wrap yourself around their leg, you throw all your body weight at them. So my thought was, if I could throw somebody before they get a hand on me, even if they were better than me and bigger than me, it's hard to beat a person with no hands, right? And then also, when I was 17, I tore my right knee out. It's completely trashed it. And, they didn't have all the surgeries they had right now. And they told me if I didn't quit judo, I would not be walking when I was in my 40s. And obviously I did not listen. Had a bunch of knee surgeries. Fortunately, surgeries got better. I now have a titanium knee. But because of that, I couldn't do half the throws in judo. Anything that required me to stand on my right leg, I couldn't do it. It would collapse. So I kept that a secret to everybody but my teammates and our team trainer. And my strategy was to drag people to the mat and take them apart from there. And it's funny because, if you look at it objectively, somebody who has no money to train overseas, somebody who has no parental support, and I don't mean my mom was a bad person, but she had 5 kids and very little money, and I was a handful and a half, maybe 2 or 3 handfuls. So I didn't have any of those things. And you add to it that I couldn't do half the techniques, and I won the world championships anyway, which shows that, I don't know, I have a great deal of determination and no common sense.
Determination for sure. I think you got a lot of common sense. And speaking of this, working with students, what advice would you give to young people that are getting started in their martial arts journey, whether it be MMA, whether it be judo, karate, taekwondo? Even though they're all so separate disciplines, they're all in a general thing as far as martial arts, they're combat sports. So what advice would you give to young people starting out in this? Again, maybe they're in their first year of their classes. What advice would you give a young fighter?
2 things. 1, get good at math. If you think of going the professional route, I hear so many kids, whether in martial arts, basketball, whatever, I'm going to go pro. There's a reason that some of those people are still fighting in the UFC, and Ronda has a farm in Hawaii. Some of them, they have no idea about taxes or, computing. Your agent gets this cut and you have to pay this cut for training, and this is how much you have left. And so I would say get good at math. Any of those kids that think, oh, I don't need school because I'm going to go pro. Oh, no. So you could see the pros who were good in school and those who weren't. And it's sad to say because some of them I really, really like, but they're not going in a good trajectory. As far as training wise, I think when you start, especially if the kid's young, the most important thing is it's easy to get there and you like the people there. Because your first few years, for somebody to learn Osotogario, basic throws, basic pins, you don't need a world champion. You need somebody who's good at teaching those basics. And the more you go to practice, the better you'll get at it. It just makes sense. Well, I see people that they drive, I live in Los Angeles, right? So they'll drive 2 hours across town to the best club where they're just starting out. Train at the club that's 10 minutes away because you're very likely to keep going to practice there. And if you don't like the people there, go somewhere else. If the sensei is a jerk to you, I don't see any benefit in that. There are some who are really sexist. There are some who act really inappropriate with women or really inappropriate with young boys. And not even, in a sex abuse type of way. An abusive type of way. I've seen people that, if somebody once told me, you don't know, that's what it takes to make a boy a man. I don't believe that. You must know who Cale Sanderson is, right?
Name sounds very familiar.
He was the wrestler who beat Dan Gable's record. I think it was undefeated. And somebody asked him in an interview once, how to make your kid a good wrestler. And he said, some people think, he's 9 years old, lock him in the closet with a badger, make him drag concrete blocks up and down the street. But he said, I don't think that. I think when they're young, let them have fun. Let them develop some, physically, some good cardio, some good physical strength. They don't have to be hitting the weights all the time when they're 9, 10 years old. And so when they get to 11, 12, 13, if they're in good physical shape, if they have some basics, they're not burnt out, then you take it from there. So my advice for somebody young, like say the 8 to 13, is have a good time and don't burn out because you have the whole rest of your life to be an adult.
Wow, that's fantastic advice. And I love this whole idea of learning the fundamentals over and over and over and over again, getting good at the basics. Everybody wants to start out, they want to be like an action movie star. Nobody wants to start out doing the same things over and over and over till it's second nature. That is such great advice. Well, you have so many accomplishments, and that has spilled over into your own family. I want to ask you a couple of things. What is it like to be the mother of Ronda Rousey? And can you tell us about her early experiences in the martial arts? I believe there might have been a broken wrist involving in this early throwing. Can you kind of expound on that?
Well, that was a few years in. Well, when she started, right, she was a skinny little 11-year-old kid. Nobody paid her any mind but me, because she was my kid. And when she got to be about 12, I thought, she's going to be good. And I called up USA Judo, the national governing body, and I said, I have a daughter who does judo, and I think she's going to be good. And it's not just because she's my daughter, because my other two kids did judo too, and they quit when they felt like quitting because I don't make them do it. I said, can you send me whatever development plan you have for gifted athletes? And they laughed at me and said, well, that'd be a nice thing to have, wouldn't it? So I thought, well, you suckers are really helpful. So I just tried with her the things that I thought were helpful for me. I wanted to make sure that there was no place safe on the mat with her, right? So she's left-handed, but I said, you need a left throw, a right throw, a forward throw, a backward throw. You need a mat technique when they're stomach, one when they're on their back, one when you're in front of them. So, and the other thing we worked on was transitions, that most people are not very good at that transition from standing to mat work. They either fight standing, and then everybody says, okay, now we're in mat work. But in a real tournament, and this all came, actually, a lot of this came from my background academically. There's a guy named Thorndike, who probably, this will be the first time anybody talks about E.L. Thorndike in martial arts. But Thorndike's law of transfer says the closer a situation you practice something is to the situation when you have to do it, when you're tested on it and you consider a match a test, the more transfer will occur. So if you want somebody to be able to win a tournament by when they throw a person going straight into an arm bar, then you practice that. You don't practice standing and then later practice on the mat. I took her around to a lot of different clubs. And at first I thought, I've got to, it was easy when she was 11, right? But 11, 12, 13, I've got to be the one that's tougher. I've got to be able to pound her. I've got to really give her a fight so she develops. And this friend of mine, who unfortunately passed away very young, Steve Bell, was a coach from Great Britain. And he said, are you crazy? He said, do you really think Bella Caroli gets up on the parallel bars and flips around with those little girls? No, your job is to get her those techniques. It's not to have better technique than her. So I would take her all kinds of places. And I have found that you can get a lot of accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit. So I would take her to all these different clubs where she could work out and somebody could feel like a hot shot because she was on the junior world team or whatever, and she was training with them. But I didn't care because she was, improving her grip. She was improving her left uchimata, whatever she needed to work on. And I have a lot of friends being in the sport for a long time that I could say, Steve, you were on the Olympic team. Your left uchimata is great. Help my kid with it. So when she was, so we used to work out together all the time. And when she's about 15, we're at practice, and the biggest newbie mistake ever, I must have said 10,000 times in my life, at the very least, don't reach for the mat, right? So she's going to throw me, and I'm thinking, there's no way Ronda can throw me, right? And she does. And I'm just reaching for the mat to steady myself because I think there's no way she could throw me. And I fractured my wrist. But I didn't tell her about it for a long time because I don't want to make her feel bad, because she would have felt really bad.
Sure.
But it was me being an idiot. And it's funny because I know so much better than to do that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is she has become very successful in the WWE, and she's got so much charisma, and she's a natural performer. But what did you think about her transition to professional wrestling when that first all came about? What were your first impressions of that?
Oh, this is funny. So I was living in Santiago at the time because we had opened another office in Chile, and I had never seen professional wrestling. I thought it was like collegiate wrestling, except they said who was going to win. So I go to this thing with a bunch of my friends who are also software developers, right? Thinking I'm going to see like Ronda in a singlet and collegiate wrestling. which if you have watched WWE, which I presume you have, is not that. So I thought it was super cool. It was not at all what I expected.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, she's got the charisma. That's the thing. It was natural transition because she is such a great performer. And so it was really neat to see that transition. She's the women's champ now, actually.
Yeah.
So as of
Yeah.
Sunday. So can you tell us, this is really interesting to me. Can you tell me about your work at the Spirit Lake Reservation and how working with those children became 7-generation games?
Well, I had worked on the Spirit Lake Nation for a while. I was a professor at the tribal college. I had done evaluations of some of the social service programs they had funded. And my business partner, my original business partner, and I, Dr. Eric Longi, were invited to Washington, D.C. to analyze the National Indian Education Study, which is data on all American Indian, Alaska Native children in the United States. And we found that the more kids learned their language and culture, the worse they did in math, which surprised me. And Eric, who was at the time president of the school board on his reservation, said, well, think about it logically. If there's 6-7 hours in a school day, and you take an hour out every day to learn Dakota history and another half hour out to learn Dakota language, it's that much less for them to learn math and English. So we kind of stewed on these results for a while. And he says to me, I'm not going to accept that my grandkids will learn their culture or math. You need to come up with something. Eric is much more, he was president of the school board. Previously, he was president of the tribal college. So he's much more of like an administrative leader type person. And I'm much more of a tech type of person. And so we start out together, which is a really good mix. And our first game was called Spirit Lake the Game. And all of our games center around stories because so often kids think math has no point, right? So, or it doesn't apply to me. So in Spirit Lake the Game, at the beginning, you are walking through this virtual world. You walk into a village and there's a teepee. You've played games. It says, enter here. And the character says, everyone's sick. We need you to go out and get this herb to make medicine. And so you go out into the woods, you find that particular herb, which was an herb. It's called we call it echinacea. They called it the purple cone flower, same thing, that we actually use for medicine now. And that the Dakota actually used. And so if there's 8 people sick, you need 3 for each person. You put the right number. When you find them, then you go back to the teepee, you turn it over. If you have the wrong number, then it shows everybody puking. It turns out that 8-year-olds to 9-year-olds are highly amused by people puking. But it's showing, so every game we do is like that. Making Camp Navajo is a lot of it is focused on herding sheep. And I know more about sheep now than I ever could have imagined. But for example, that now you will know this too, that if your flock has better nourishment, especially the ewes during pregnancy, then they will have more twins, and then finding the proportion of twins. And if you're making profit. So every game we do has math in it in real life context where kids, if they're living on a reservation, if they're working on a farm, living on a farm, they can see this is really something I'm going to use, as opposed to solving an equation that's, 3x plus 4 times, 4.25y equals question mark. And it doesn't seem like anything they would ever use until you put in that like X is the number of fence posts and Y is the number of feet of wire, and you're building a fence.
That's great because kids can relate to that. It's all about it. There's not this disconnect that, math is over here, real life is over here. It all blurs into the same thing. I love how you're making that connection for students. And again, what a great way to learn. So let me ask you, how does your background in judo and the martial arts help you in your business life? I mean, does it help you approach challenges differently? Do you see things differently because of your martial arts background?
I think it helps me greatly. And it's funny because most of the people who win world championships in martial arts, they go and they open a gym or they sell mats, so they have some kind of program for, strength and conditioning. And all that is great, but I don't do anything like that, right? I make games to help kids learn math and English and history and indigenous languages. But running a startup, it's a long, hard road, right? And it's the same thing winning a world championship. You don't go into the gym 3 times a week and at the end of the year, you're a world champion. And there's also times when you just don't get it, right? You train and you screw up and you don't win the national championships that year. So I think the biggest thing people don't understand about starting a company, especially in technology, is it is generally a very long slog. You'll hear about somebody who's an overnight success. And it's like Rhonda said the other day, overnight success means nobody was looking at you all those years you were training.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, maybe they started a company 3 years ago and that company is really successful. But the reason why you hear about serial entrepreneurs is that they started a company 7 years ago and it didn't, and it failed. They started one 5 years ago and it failed. And so then they started this one 3 years ago and it's succeeding. Well, we've been a little fortunate that 7 generation games, we have not failed. But there's been times when it was close. There's been times when my co-founders and I were making the payroll out of our savings. There were times when we didn't take a salary. And I think you learn from those experiences training that things that are worth it take sacrifices and they take a long time.
Very good. This next question, really, I thought about this a lot. You and your daughter are super successful, and I think you've already shared some of those secrets to the success. It's going through the adversities and never quitting and having the attitude of excellence. Can you share with our listeners any tips on handling success? Because many people do well during the climb. They're driven towards the goal, but all of a sudden you hear these people that once they achieve success or once they've reached the goal, their lives just fall apart. How do you handle success, and can you give any tips on that?
There are a couple of things. I always tell my kids, don't read the bottom half of the internet. If there's an article and a bunch of people writing comments about it, whatever they think about you, you don't need to know. Right? It's kind of funny. I just got picked for National University. I teach there part-time as faculty of the year. And maybe I shouldn't confess this, but I never read my teaching evaluations. I just do the very best I can. So I think part of it is not to worry too much what other people think about you. Do the best you can. The other thing I tell my kids all the time is be nice to people on the way up because they will catch you on the way down. Nobody's trajectory is a straight line. Sometimes you have bumps. Just in minor example, we did a couple of Kickstarter campaigns and a lot of people backed us on Kickstarter. And then that helped give us some visibility to investors who said, oh, maybe this is a good idea. And I have a very cynical view of humanity, I guess, because some of the people that talk a good game and, oh, we're best friends and I'll always be there for you, they didn't back us at all. Not even $2. And then other people that I didn't know terribly well, like some people from the reservations would, put in $20 to help this game get built. And I told Maria, one of my co-founders, I said, man, we can't screw this up. Because I know some of these people, that $20 was, they drove around less that week because that was their gas money. So I think everybody that you meet is important. And often the people that you think will help you won't. And the people that do help you, you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Wow, that was fantastic advice. Fantastic advice. What was it like to be inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame? I mean, this is the elites of the elite. Every year we go to see the classes that are inducted. I mean, these are the best of the best. What was it like for you to be inducted into this International Sports Hall of Fame?
It was really cool because, and I'm sure you know this, but probably not everybody listening to it does. I mean, I've been inducted into a number of halls of fame, right? For U.S. Judo Association, the Pan American Judo Association, San Diego Sports Hall of Fame, and so on. But the thing about the International Sports Hall of Fame is their criteria are: number one, achievement in sport; number two, achievement outside of sport. So you can't have won Olympic gold medals and then, become a bum, live in your mom's basement. And number three, a kind of moral character doing something good for society. And so basically a combination of 7-generation games and then the judo program that I've run in South LA for years is what got me into that. And yes, I was not the best child, but I also don't have any I don't have any skeletons in my closet. Sometimes Fairfax Hackley's one of the people in charge of nominations. Sometimes I'll suggest somebody who's like in prison, but how about that guy just to see Fairfax and go,
Hack. Fairfax definitely has the highest standards. I mean, that's why we know when you have been inducted, you know that you are the best of the best. And got to ask if your neck hurts from wearing that big medal around. If your listeners, if you don't know, the medal that you receive is absolutely massive when you get inducted. And it was just great to see you honored for all the things that you've done. With that being said, because this always is an interesting question to me, because sometimes it surprises people. What do you personally consider your greatest accomplishment?
I think for anybody, it has to be my kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like Warren Buffett said that if you fail as a father, it doesn't matter what other success you had in life, you're a failure. And I feel that as a mother. My children complain sometimes, but it's like Maya Angelou said, I did the best I could with what I knew. When I knew better, I did better. And I can honestly say that pretty much every step of the way, I did the best with what I knew. And a lot of people say, oh, I put my kids first. But really, like I said, all four of my kids started judo, and one of them stuck with it to 2 Olympics. One of them stuck with it to win the junior nationals. But the other three, besides Ronda, at some point said, this is not my thing. Maria wanted to run track. She ran track all the way through college. Julie wanted to play soccer. So I think being able to look at them as individuals and not care what anybody else thought. When Ronda was 15, she made the junior world team. And there's a lot of pressure for her to go, and she didn't want to go. And I told the USA Judo coaching staff, the fact that the best person under 20 in this country is 15 is not my problem. It's my daughter's problem. So no, she's not going.
Amazing. And again, I was kind of expecting to hear that, but some people, they look at all the different awards or thinking that people have achieved, but not realizing that a great parent would always say, my kids are my greatest accomplishment. What are you most passionate about right now? You've got so many things that you've done. You're involved in so many things. What is your number one passion right now at the moment?
Well, right now we're planning in the next few weeks to do a community round, which was something I didn't even know what was until about a month ago. And this goes back to my belief that all good deeds come back to you. Mm-hmm. So in very short words, we had some students come to us and say, we need to do a class project. And we need to analyze a real company's data. Can we have access to all your financial data? And we're like, sure, kids. We were students once, And I guess a lot of people told them no, but we said yes. And they turned in their class project, and it was so good, their professor recommended them for this competition of all the Ivy League schools in finance, and they made the finals. And so then Wharton School of Business, which is where the students were, said, we will sponsor, endorse you all for a community round if you would like to do that. And that's where anybody in the community can invest. Now, normally, if you were going to invest in, say, Apple when it was starting out, say whatever is equivalent to Apple starting out now, unless you're an accredited investor, I can't take your money. An accredited investor makes at least $200,000 a year. And the idea is you don't want people going to, little old grandmas and people who are very naive about investment. My youngest daughter's 24, and getting them to invest money and getting ripped off. So the assumption is if you are making at least that amount of money, either you will check into it yourself, you can afford to pay somebody to check into it. With a community round, there's an organization, We Funders one, there's a number of them, that they do all of that due diligence. They scrutinize your financial records down to a T. They look at all your contracts with your employees, see if there's anything you might get sued for, and on and on and on. And since the students had done most of that, it cost us very little to have it done. And Wharton said they would send it out to all of their alumni. So that way, the little guy was $100 or $200 to invest can actually invest in a startup and maybe get a lot of their money back. Because our early investors, I really appreciate them, right? But, if they invested $100,000 early on and their money tripled, so then they're going to take that extra $200,000 and pile on top of the $300 million they already got, right? It's not going to make a big difference for them. So the idea that we can do this where anybody can come in, I think is a really exciting thing.
That is so cool. I had never heard of that myself. So
Me
that's
neither.
very interesting, super interesting. Well, I only got two more questions. We want to be respectful of your time, but this is one of my favorite, especially with just the background and all the things that you've done. What is one thing that you believe people could do today that could improve their lives? So if there was just one thing, because a lot of times we talk about people will take a self-improvement course, or they'll say, well, you got to do this list of things. What's one thing? Because I think if people could just start with one thing, what's one thing that you think people could do or start doing today that would drastically or dramatically improve their life?
I don't think your life improves dramatically. I think it improves bit by bit. The first thing comes to my mind is say thank you. Send an email to somebody who helped you out and say thank you. Write a thank you card. It is good to keep in touch with people. I had someone ask me, because when I was young, I had no money to travel, right? And so there were people who bought my plane tickets. And one of the guys who was on the US team with me said, how on earth did you get so many people to donate to the AnnMaria Fund? And I said, I don't know. And I ran into somebody who had bought a few of my plane tickets for going to Europe. And apparently he'd done it for a number of athletes. And he said to me, do you know you're the only one that ever wrote me a thank you note? And so whether it's your teacher or your mom or somebody who funded you or your coach, I think there's too much animosity in life, and you probably think about people that helped you out, but how often do you tell them? So I'd say that, just say thank you.
Oh, gratitude's so important. I mean, if we had time, we could camp out there for an hour, because there's a whole science of gratitude and what it does to your emotional and mental health too. Not just that it helps other people and invests in their life, but it actually immediately will make a change in your outlook. Gratitude changes people. So that is such a powerful, powerful lesson. I'm so thankful that you shared it for us. My last question is this, kind of a two-parter. Where can people go to learn more about you or what you're involved in, your story? And is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners today?
They can go to 7. It's the number 7, generationgames.com. And there's all kinds of stuff there on the games that we make. If they look under our blogs, under Founders Corner, Maria and I are always writing blogs there about what's happening. They can sign up for our newsletter there and find out all the things that are going on. If they're in education, actually, we were funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture for providing professional development to teachers in 6 states, which are Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oregon, Arizona, and New Mexico. And anybody who's an educator, has an after-school program, a paraprofessional that lives in one of those 6 states, they can take our training online and actually get paid $150 for it and get all of our games for free because it's funded by USDA.
Wow. Very cool.
Teachers don't get enough respect. They don't get enough money. They don't get enough help. We're asking them to do this training like outside of school. And, here's this new software. And learn on your own time how to do it. And so I argued when we developed this program that we need to pay those teachers, those paraprofessionals, those after-school staff for their time to learn it. And as my mother used to say, a thank you is nice, but a thank you for a check for $150 is nicer.
Amen. I love that because I was raised, both my parents were teachers. My wife was a teacher. My daughter's going to college to be a teacher. The podcast producer, he's a teacher. So that really resonated with us again. That was just so fantastic. And, it's they spend all this money to go to school, and they're has a job that is really paid in what I call legacy, because you're not making huge finances, but you're changing the world. So it is one of the greatest jobs in the world, but maybe it's not a big financial payoff always, but it sure is a payoff and legacy. Well, I would like to thank our guest, Dr. AnnMaria DeMars, today for investing in all of our listeners today. I know that there's a lot of stuff people are going to apply today. They were inspired. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.